I was exhausted. The red-eye from Tokyo had landed 2 hours ago, and I still smelled like airplane recycled air and cheap coffee. But I couldn't sleep. Something felt wrong. The phone call came at 2 a.m. Is this Sam Morrison? A woman's voice, professional but hesitant. Yeah, who's this? My name is Patricia Chen. I'm the assistant director at Willowbrook Care Center. Your grandmother Eleanor is a resident here, and… Wait, what? My grandmother doesn't live in a care center. She lives with my brother David. Silence on the other end. Then, carefully, Mr. Morrison, your grandmother has been with us for 8 months. I'm calling because she's asking for you. She seems distressed. I was in my car 15 minutes later, still in my wrinkled travel clothes, Google Maps taking me to a part of Portland I barely recognized. Not the nice assisted living places with gardens and chef-prepared meals. This was the kind of facility you see in investigative news reports. The fluorescent lights hurt my eyes. Eleanor sat in a wheelchair by a window, staring at nothing. She looked smaller than I remembered. Thinner. When she turned and saw me, her face crumpled. Sam. Oh, Sam, you came back. I knelt beside her chair. Grandma, what are you doing here? What happened? Her hands shook as she gripped mine. Your brother said it was temporary. Just while he renovated the house. That was March. Sweetheart. It's almost February now. 10 months. I'd been teaching in Japan for 18 months. Video calling when I could. Always seeing David's pristine living room in the background when Grandma and I talked. He'd always made excuses when I asked to see her room. She's napping. She's at her book club. The lighting's bad in there. All lies. Tell me everything, I said. Eleanor looked around nervously, then lowered her voice. Do you remember when the bookstore closed? Of course I remembered. Morrison's Books had been a Portland institution since 1979. Grandma had bought it when my grandfather died, turned it into something magical. It was where I fell in love with stories, spending afternoons in the children's section while she worked. Where I decided to become a teacher, where I wrote my first terrible novel in the back office. But Amazon and the pandemic had slowly bled it dry. By 2023, she owed $300,000 in back rent. The landlord offered to buy the building prime downtown location, worth $3.5 million. David convinced me to sell, Eleanor continued. He said books were dead. Dinosaurs. He had this big presentation about cryptocurrency and tech investments. He was so confident, Sam, and I was so tired. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. He said, if I invested with him, he'd triple it. That I could retire in style, live with him and Jennifer. Never worry about money again. Her voice cracked. All I wanted was to keep my books, to live somewhere with my books. He promised I could turn his spare room into a library. What happened to the money, Grandma? She looked at me with eyes that had seen too much disappointment. I gave him everything. $3.5 million. He was my son, Sam. I trusted him. The next morning, I went to David's house unannounced. He lived in West Hills now, in one of those modern glass boxes that cost more than most people make in a lifetime. A Tesla sat in the driveway. Through the window, I could see art that definitely hadn't been there during my last visit. Jennifer opened the door, her face frozen in what I'd learned to recognize as fresh Botox. Sam. Oh my God. You're back. David didn't tell me you were visiting. Surprise visit. I pushed past her. Where is he? David came down the stairs in workout gear, holding a green smoothie. He'd always been fit, but now he looked like he lived in the gym. Little brother, when did you get back? Where's Grandma's room? His expression flickered. Just for a second. What? You told me she was living here. You told me, every single call for 10 months, that she was upstairs, that she was happy, that she loved having her own space. I was shaking now. So where the hell is her room, David? Jennifer made a small noise and disappeared into the kitchen. David set down his smoothie very carefully. Look, I can explain. I saw her last night. At Willowbrook. Do you know what Willowbrook is, David? It's a Medicaid facility. The toilets don't flush half the time. The food is institutional slop. There are roaches in the halls, and our grandmother, who gave you $3.5 million, is sitting there in a wheelchair, wearing the same clothes she's probably worn for 3 days. She fell, David said quickly, right after she moved in. She sued us. Well, she threatened to. Our lawyer said it was a liability issue. We had to move her somewhere with medical staff. Bullshit. Complete bullshit. I pulled out my phone, showed him the photos I'd taken. Eleanor's room was a shared space with 3 other residents. No privacy curtains, no personal belongings except a small box. Where are her books? David. Books? He laughed, actually laughed. Jesus, Sam, you sound like her. Always with the books. Do you know how much stuff she had? Thousands of moldy old paperbacks. We donated them. You threw away her books. We gave them to Goodwill, tax deduction. He walked to the window, looked out at his view of the city. Look, I get that you're upset. But you've been gone. You don't understand the situation. Then explain it to me. He turned back. And his face had that expression I remembered from childhood. The one that said he was about to explain something to someone too stupid to understand. Mom was hoarding that money. That building was worth $5 million, easy. She sold it for 3.5 because she felt bad for the landlord. Can you believe that? Felt bad for a guy who was going to tear it down and build condos anyway. So you decided to just take it. I invested it. I started a company, Sam. A real company. We're developing an AI platform that's going to revolutionize how people consume content. We had Series A funding lined up, and his jaw tightened. The market shifted. It's temporary. I'll make it back. I looked around the house, the art, the furniture, the Tesla outside. How much is left? David, that's not really your concern. How much? About 400,000, he said quietly. But that's tied up in the company. I can't just liquidate. You spent $3 million in less than a year. I invested it. God, you're just like her. You don't understand how business works. This is my inheritance anyway. She was going to die and leave it to us. I'm just accessing it early. The words hung in the air. Jennifer gasped from the kitchen doorway. I spoke very quietly. She's not dead, David. You know what I mean. No, I really don't. I headed for the door, then stopped. By the way, the care facility called me because Grandma's on Medicaid. Medicaid? David, you reported that she has no assets. That's fraud. His face went white. You can't prove. You signed the paperwork. It's documented. And I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly what you did. I moved Eleanor out that afternoon. My apartment was small, barely 600 square feet. But I didn't care. I'd been teaching English in Japan, saving money, living cheap. I had enough. The first thing I did was buy books. I went to Powell's, the big independent bookstore downtown, and filled boxes. Classics, mysteries, poetry, cookbooks, everything. I lined my walls with shelves and filled them until my apartment looked like a small library. When I brought Eleanor home, she cried. It's not much, I said. But it's yours. All of it. She touched the spines like greeting old friends. You did this for me? Of course I did, Grandma. I'm so sorry I wasn't here before. The next weeks were hard. Eleanor was weaker than she'd seemed at first. The care facility had missed a medication refill. She'd lost 20 pounds. But slowly, surrounded by books and proper food and someone who actually cared, she started to recover. We fell into a rhythm. I'd teach during the day, found a job at a local high school, and we'd have dinner together. Then she'd read while I graded papers, the silence comfortable and full. You know what I miss most? She said one evening, looking up from her book. The customers. Mrs. Chen, who came every Wednesday for the new mysteries. The teenagers doing homework in the young adult section. The way the store smelled like paper and coffee and old wood. I miss it too. She smiled, but there was something sad in it. David called today. Left a voicemail. I tensed. What did he say? That he's sorry. That he wants to talk. She set down her book. He's always been like this, Sam. Ever since he was a boy. Your grandfather spoiled him and I didn't want to see it. Didn't want to believe my own son could be so cruel? She nodded. I knew, you know, when I gave him the money, I had a feeling he'd fail me. Then why? Because I wanted to believe. I wanted to think that maybe, for once, he'd choose me over himself. She looked at her hands. Stupid old woman. You're not stupid. You're kind. There's a difference. Is there? She laughed softly. Sometimes I wonder. Over the next months, we rebuilt something. Not the bookstore that was gone, but a life. Eleanor started volunteering at the library. I worked on my novel in the evenings, reading chapters aloud to her. She was sharp as ever with her edits. David tried calling several times. Showed up at my school once. I had him escorted off campus. Then, one morning in September, Eleanor didn't get up. I found her in bed, peaceful. A book lay open on her chest. Persuasion, by Jane Austen. She'd always loved that one. The EMTs were kind. They told me it looked like she'd gone in her sleep, no pain, but I felt pain enough for both of us. The funeral was small. A few of Eleanor's old customers came, people who remembered the bookstore. My mother flew in from Arizona. She and Eleanor had been estranged for years. Long story. Jennifer came alone. Apparently she and David were taking space. David didn't come. A week later, I got a call from Eleanor's lawyer, Richard Chen. We need to schedule the will reading. Can you come to my office Thursday at 2 p.m.? Sure. Is it just me, or your brother will be there as well? There are some things that need to be discussed in person. David showed up in a suit, looking haggard. The Tesla was gone. I'd heard through Jennifer that he'd had to sell it. The startup had imploded. His business partner had filed a lawsuit. We didn't speak. Just sat on opposite sides of Chen's office while the lawyer arranged papers. Thank you both for coming, Chen began. Eleanor Morrison's will is actually quite straightforward, but there are some elements she insisted I explain in person. He opened a folder, pulled out an envelope. David leaned forward. First, the primary will. Chen read. To my grandson, Samuel Morrison, I leave my personal effects, my collection of first edition books, and my gratitude for the love and care he showed me in my final months. I felt my throat tighten. To my son, David Morrison, I leave $1, and this message. You treated me as if I were already dead. You valued my money more than my life. I hope someday you understand what you've lost. David's face flushed. That's it? $1. I'm contesting this. She was clearly not in her right mind. Let me finish, Chen said calmly. He pulled out a second envelope. Mrs. Morrison was very specific about how this next part should be presented. My heart started pounding. When Eleanor sold Morrison's Books building, the sale contract included a specific clause. The new owner had 2 years to secure permits and begin development. If they failed, the property would revert to Eleanor at the original purchase price of $3.5 million. David went still. The developer ran into zoning issues, historic preservation boards, neighborhood opposition. Last month, they abandoned the project. Chen slid a document across the desk. The building reverted to Eleanor's ownership 3 weeks before she died. She repurchased it, using funds she'd kept in a separate account, money from the sale of her personal collection of rare books, which she'd sold privately. She never told anyone. I couldn't breathe. Additionally, Chen continued, Eleanor maintained a life insurance policy worth $3.5 million. She'd been paying premiums from her Social Security and a small pension. She never cashed it. He pushed papers toward me. Samuel, you are the sole beneficiary. You inherit the building currently valued at $4.8 million and the life insurance payout. Total estate value, approximately $8.3 million. The room was spinning. David stood up. This is bullshit. She can't. I'll fight this. I'll... Sit down, Mr. Morrison. Chen's voice was ice. There's more. Eleanor documented everything. Every conversation. Every promise you made and broke. Every dollar you spent. She kept receipts, recordings, photographs. She also filed a formal complaint with Adult Protective Services and the State Medicaid Fraud Division. He slid another folder across the desk. These are the charges being filed against you. Medicaid fraud, elder financial abuse, elder neglect. The state is seeking repayment of all Medicaid funds spent on Eleanor's care, plus penalties. Additionally, several of your business associates have been contacted. The evidence of how you acquired your startup capital has been made available. David's face had gone from red to white. She. This was a setup? This was a test, Chen said quietly. Which you failed spectacularly. David looked at me, something desperate in his eyes. Sam, come on. We're brothers. You're not going to let them. I stood up. I visited Grandma every day for 6 months. Every single day, and not once did she complain about you. Not once did she say she regretted giving you the money. You know what she said instead? He didn't answer. She said she hoped you'd learn, that you'd grow, that someday you'd understand that people matter more than money. I picked up the folder Chun had given me. But I guess that's not going to happen, is it? I walked to the door, then paused. Oh, and David? Jennifer's lawyer contacted me. She saw the news reports about the fraud charges. She's filing for divorce. Thought you should know. I left him sitting there, surrounded by the wreckage of his own greed. 3 months later, I stood in front of a familiar building. The Morrison's book sign was gone, but the bones were good. Beautiful, even, high ceilings, original hardwood floors, big windows facing the street. The contractor gave me the estimate, $400,000 to renovate, keeping the historic character while updating the infrastructure. I had the money. More than enough. I hired back 3 of Grandma's old employees, put out a call on social media for book donations. The community response was overwhelming. Thousands of books, people's personal collections, some sent from across the country by people who'd heard the story. The day we reopened, the line wrapped around the block. I stood at the register, watching people browse, hearing their excited conversations, smelling that combination of paper and coffee and old wood that Grandma had loved so much. Above the door, a new sign read, Eleanor's Legacy, Morrison Family Books, Est. 1979. Mrs. Chen was my first customer. She bought a mystery and cried when I told her it was on the house. A reporter from the local paper interviewed me for their community section. The story went viral. Local news picked it up. Then national outlets. Grandson honors grandmother's legacy after brother's betrayal, the headlines read. David's story went viral too, but for different reasons. The fraud charges were public record. Former business partners came forward with their own stories. The lawsuit from his partner revealed that almost $2 million had been spent on personal expenses, not business investments. He lost everything. The house in foreclosure. The divorce settlement took what little remained. Last I heard, he was living in a studio apartment in Gresham, working at a call center. I should feel satisfied, vindicated, but mostly I just feel sad. Because here's what David never understood. Grandma didn't set up that test to punish him. She did it hoping he'd pass, hoping that when faced with the choice between money and love, he'd choose love. She gave him every chance, every opportunity to be decent, to be kind, and he failed. I still have the last book she was reading when she died. Persuasion. There's a passage she'd underlined. There is nothing worth remembering in my life but my time with you. Sometimes, late at night when the bookstore is closed, I sit in the back office where I used to write as a kid, and I read that line again, and I think about how Eleanor spent her last month surrounded by books and someone who loved her, how she died knowing her legacy would continue, how she won, in the end, not through revenge but through love. That's the thing about stories. Grandma used to say, the best ones aren't about getting even. They're about what remains when everything else is stripped away. What remains is this: a bookstore full of light, shelves full of stories, a community gathered around something beautiful, and the knowledge that when I have kids someday, they'll grow up in these same aisles, falling in love with the same magic. Some legacies can't be bought, can't be stolen, can't be destroyed by greed. They can only be passed on. And that, David will never understand. But I do. I finally do.